3 squad cars surrounded me before I even unpacked. The HOA called 911 on me before I even stepped into my own lake house, screaming I was trespassing on their shoreline. But the deeper I dug, the clearer it became. The docks, the boathouse, even the water they threatened me over, all of it was legally mine. This one gets wild, so stick with me to the end. And if you like real stories about justice and land rights, go on and hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. The gravel beneath my tires crackled like brittle bones as I turned off the narrow forest road and rolled down the final slope toward the lake. After 10 hours behind the wheel, the first glimpse of the water hit me harder than any cup of coffee ever could. Blue glass rippling under the late afternoon Montana sun, pine shadows stretching long and thin across the shoreline. My new home, my second chance, my quiet life finally beginning. I killed the engine, stepped out of my pickup, and let the cool lake breeze wash over my face. It carried the scent of pine needles, cold driftwood, and that faint mineral tang only true mountain water has. I grabbed my old canvas suitcase from the back seat, its handle worn smooth from years of job sites, and took 3 easy steps toward the porch of the lake house I'd dreamed about since childhood summers. Then everything exploded. Sirens shredded the quiet, bouncing between the tree trunks like warning shots. 3 squad cars fishtailed onto the gravel drive, lights flaring red and blue against my cabin windows. Dust rolled thick across the shoreline. Doors slammed. Boots hit the ground. Voices barked commands I couldn't quite make out over the ringing in my ears. I stood there frozen, suitcase dangling from my hand. From behind the sheriff's units came the unmistakable click of expensive heels on gravel. A woman in a sharp salmon-pink blazer emerged, like she was stepping onto a stage she'd been waiting years to command. Silver hair fixed in stiff curls, clipboard clutched to her chest, expression carved from pure authority. Marilyn Dorrance, HOA president of Clearwater Bluffs. I recognized her from the welcome packet I hadn't bothered to read. "There!" she shouted, pointing at me like I was a rattlesnake about to strike. "That's him! He's trespassing on restricted waterfront property. Officers detain him immediately." The deputy closest to her, a tall man with a sunburned neck and a tight jawline, raised a hand toward me. "Sir, stop right where you are." I blinked. This is my house." Marilyn scoffed so loudly the pines should have echoed it. "His house? Oh, that's rich. He broke into a federally protected parcel under HOA jurisdiction. The shoreline is restricted. He has no right to be here." A second deputy approached, hand resting on the top of his holster, not gripping it, but close. Too close. The kind of caution you use when you don't know if a man's desperate or drunk. "Sir, I need you to put the bag down," the deputy said. Slowly. I lowered the suitcase into the dust. My heartbeat thudded hard enough that I felt it in my gums. "I have the deed in my truck," I said. "The keys are in my pocket. I moved out here to live in this house. I just got here." "Lies," Marilyn snapped, already lifting her phone. "He's been circling this place for days. God knows what he's planning. I'm calling 911 again. We need county and federal response." She wasn't bluffing. Her manicured thumb was already tapping the emergency call button. "Ma'am," one deputy said, trying to calm her. "We're all ready." "I said now!" she screamed, and the sound ripped straight through the quiet lakeshore, like fabric tearing. My confusion curdled into something heavier, something that tightened across my ribs. How does a man get arrested for stepping onto his own porch? The deputy in front of me held out his hand, palm open, calm but firm. "Sir, I'm going to need to see your ID." Behind him, Marilyn was shouting into her phone, pacing tight circles, heels grinding fresh scars into my gravel drive. And all I could think was, if this is how moving day starts, what the hell have I gotten myself into? The wind shifted off the lake as if even the water was holding its breath. I kept my hands visible, palms open, trying to look like a man who'd simply shown up to move into his own home, because that's exactly who I was. But standing between 3 squad cars, swirling dust, and one furious HOA president, I suddenly felt like an intruder on land I'd worked years to afford. Deputy Miller, his name tag catching the dying sunlight, stepped a little closer. "Mr. Mercer," I said. "Daniel Mercer. This is my property. I have the deed in the truck. The HOA doesn't own this place." Before he could respond, Marilyn Dorrance marched forward like a general who'd already declared victory. Her heels stabbed into the gravel. Her pink blazer glowed like neon against the deepening dusk. "Officers," she barked, "I have the documentation right here. Clearwater Bluffs HOA controls the entire shoreline, including the dock, boathouse, and all waterfront access. This man is trespassing on restricted community property." She shoved a packet of papers at Deputy Miller. Glossy covers, sharp corners, professionally printed. The kind of packet fabricated to look important, even if the contents said nothing. The deputy flipped through it, while another officer took a cautious step behind me, watching my hands like I was concealing a weapon instead of a set of cabin keys and a pocket knife I used for opening boxes. I tried to steady my voice. "I bought this house outright. The shoreline came with it." Marilyn let out a laugh sharp enough to cut rope. "The shoreline? Oh, sweetheart. The shoreline belongs to the HOA. Always has. You can't just waltz in and claim riparian property access because you feel entitled to it." My jaw tightened. "I have the deed, and my survey shows the property line runs into the water." "Nonsense," she said, waving her manicured hand like she was brushing away a mosquito. "We have the county ruling right here. Officers, it's on page 3. Deputy Miller turned to the page she jabbed her finger at. His eyebrows drew together in a way that made my stomach twist. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "this page references a shoreline maintenance agreement, not property ownership." She stepped closer, invading the space like she expected him to bend to her authority by sheer force of personality. "Read it again," she hissed. "It clearly states the HOA has jurisdiction over all waterfront structures." "Jurisdiction isn't ownership," I shot back. "Those are 2 entirely different things." The second deputy, the one behind me, spoke up. "Sir, until we verify, you can't enter the structures." "That's my boathouse," I said, heat rising in my chest. "My uncle worked his whole life to build that dock." "And your uncle," Marilyn snapped, "never filed the appropriate paperwork. None of the previous owners did. That's why the HOA absorbed the shoreline for community preservation." Absorbed? Like the lake was some kind of lost sock they'd found in a dryer. I shook my head. "That's not how property works." "Exactly," she barked, triumphant. "Which is why we need to keep people like you from abusing it. We protect the lake from unregulated traffic, from illegal boats, from risky behavior, and from squatters." My hands curled into fists until I forced them flat again. "I'm not a squatter. We'll see what the county says." Marilyn raised her phone again. "I'm calling 911 for federal confirmation. They need to know a private citizen is attempting to seize HOA-controlled lakefront." Deputy Miller sighed. "Ma'am, we're already here." She ignored him. "Hello, yes. Return officers to Clearwater Bluffs. Immediate escalation. The trespasser is claiming he owns the shoreline. He's becoming hostile." "Hostile?" I sputtered. "I'm standing still." Miller's expression softened a hair, but he kept the professional mask. "Sir, please cooperate. We just need to sort this out." My heart thudded, a hollow echo under the weight of humiliation. How fast could a man lose control of his own moving day? How many neighbors were watching from behind curtains? How many already assumed the worst? Marilyn snapped her phone shut with a crisp click and smiled at me like a cat that had already swallowed the canary. The county already ruled this shoreline belongs to us, she said smoothly. So unless you enjoy being handcuffed on your first day here, I suggest you step away from the property lines. The lake wind rustled through the pines. Dust swirled around the squad cars in lazy spirals. The water lapped against the rocks with slow, patient rhythm, like it knew something I didn't. And standing there, surrounded by law enforcement, lights flashing across my cabin door, one thought hammered through my mind. If this is how moving day starts, what the hell have I gotten myself into? Sir, Deputy Miller said gently, let me see your ID. Behind him, Marilyn raised her phone again, dialing with manic determination. And the second 911 call began. Her voice shot across the lakeshore like a fire alarm. Yes, this is an active trespassing emergency. The suspect is still here. He refuses to leave. He may try to access restricted structures. Send additional units. I stared at her, stunned. Restricted structures? That's my boathouse. Deputy Miller gave me a careful look, torn between duty and plain disbelief. Mr. Mercer, I'm going to have to ask you again to stay calm. We don't want this escalating. Escalating? The woman was practically auditioning for a hostage negotiation team. The lake wind kicked up, rolling dust across the gravel and whistling through the rails of the dock behind the cabin. The boards creaked like old bones settling in for a long night. I wanted nothing more than to walk down those steps, pry open the boathouse door, and finally step onto the dock I'd dreamed about for months. But Marilyn planted herself between me and the lake like a gatekeeper to a kingdom she thought she owned. You are not to approach the water, she snapped, ending her call. The HOA has deemed the shoreline a protected communal zone. Any attempt to access it counts as violation, interference, and disruption of community assets. And any attempt to stop me from entering my own property is illegal, I said. She smiled with the confidence of someone who'd gotten away with this same performance a dozen times before. We have county permission, Mr. Mercer. The last homeowner abandoned the place. The HOA stabilized the shoreline, repaired the dock, and took possession as caretakers. Caretakers, I repeated. That's a nice word for squatters. Deputy Miller cleared his throat. Look, folks, let's keep it civil. But the tension clamped down, thick as the humidity rolling off the lake. Neighbors had begun emerging from their porches, half hidden behind screen doors, or standing with crossed arms along the property line. Their faces were a mix of curiosity, judgment, and something more unsettling: resignation. Like they'd seen this exact show play out before, and they already knew the ending. A man in a faded flannel whispered to the woman beside him. She whispered back. A kid peered from behind a porch post like I was a monster from one of his bedtime stories. Mr. Mercer, Miller said again, gentler this time. Until we clarify the documents, I'm advising you not to approach the dock. Why not? I asked. Because she says so? It's procedure, he said, rubbing the bridge of his nose. If two parties claim ownership, we treat the area as disputed. Standard protocol. Marilyn clasped her hands behind her clipboard, smug as a queen. You heard the deputy? Something inside me snapped. Not anger exactly, but a strain too tight to ignore. I took one deliberate step toward the boathouse. Marilyn shrieked, "Officers! He's approaching the restricted dock!" Both deputies tensed, one shifting sideways as if to intercept me physically. My voice cut through the moment like steel. I'm not crossing any lines. I'm standing on my gravel, on my driveway, on my parcel. I have every right to walk toward my property. You do not, Marilyn snapped. Your parcel ends at the cabin steps. The lake belongs to the HOA. That boathouse is under our jurisdiction. I turned, facing her fully. Show me the deed that says that. Her lips curled. I don't owe you anything. Of course you don't, I said softly, because you don't have it. For the first time since she arrived, her eyes flickered, just a sliver, but I caught it. The neighbors caught it. Even the deputies noticed. "What I have," she said stiffly, "is documented authority to protect shared property against unauthorized individuals." "That's me?" I asked. "Unauthorized?" Her chin lifted. "According to the HOA bylaws, yes." "Bureaucratic nonsense," I muttered. But Marilyn was already waving her clipboard like a sword. "Officers, this man is non-compliant. Detain him if necessary." Detain. That word tasted rancid. Deputy Miller let out a slow breath. "Ma'am, I can't detain a homeowner for standing on his driveway." "He's lying," she snapped. "He forged the documents." My jaw nearly hit the gravel. "Forged? I haven't shown you a single document yet." "That's what a forger says." The absurdity would have been funny if it hadn't been terrifying. I reached for my truck door, intent on pulling out my purchase papers, when a shuffle caught my attention. A figure stepped out from the shade near the property line. An elderly man with a weathered face, stooped shoulders, and slow, deliberate movements. His boots were old, his flannel faded, but his eyes were sharp as broken glass. He glanced around once, then slipped something small and folded into my hand as he walked past, pretending to inspect the ground. His voice was barely above the rustling pines. "They did it to the last owner, too," he whispered. Then he ambled away, as if he hadn't said a word. I blinked, heart pounding. When I unfolded the paper, my breath caught. It was a hand-drawn map, rough, aged, yellowing around the edges. The shoreline was outlined in thick pencil. A boundary line curved around the property and extended straight through the dock, into the boathouse, into the water, into my water. Marilyn noticed the slip of paper in my hand and took a single step backward, sudden and sharp. The deputy closest to me asked, "What's that?" I folded it carefully. "A problem," I said, "for the HOA." The lake went eerily quiet, the way it does before a storm breaks. Something bigger was happening here. Something the neighbors knew. Something the HOA feared. And something buried deeper in this lakeshore than any of them realized. And the map in my hand was the first crack in whatever lie they'd been living. The second 911 call had gone through. Backup was coming. And so was the truth. The gravel road beyond the spruces gave a low rumble as another unit made its way toward the property. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Not fear exactly, but something heavier. Something like stepping into a story that started long before I ever arrived. The paper the old man handed me felt warm in my palm from how tightly I was holding it. Marilyn noticed. Her eyes flicked to my hand, then up to my face, sharpening like a hawk spotting a mouse. "What is that?" she demanded. "Information," I said quietly. Deputy Miller stepped closer. "Mr. Mercer, if you have documents relevant to the property dispute, now's the time to show them." I hesitated, not because I doubted the paper, but because something told me this map wasn't a one-off curiosity. The edges were browned like it had been stored for decades. The pencil lines, though faded, were confident and consistent. This wasn't some neighbor doodle. This was a record. "I'll show you," I said, "but I'm getting my paperwork first. If that's all right, Deputy?" Miller nodded. "Go ahead," slowly. I opened my truck door, the hinge protesting with a tired groan. My file box sat on the passenger seat beneath a layer of road dust. I pulled it out, brushed it clean, and flipped the lid open. It was all there. The closing folder, inspection forms, sale receipts, and the old envelope the previous owner's niece had mailed me with a simple note. "This belonged to your uncle. Should go with the property." I had never looked inside. Until now. I slid the weathered envelope out and felt something shift inside, paper thick and stiff. When I tore it open, a smell like old cedar and basement dust drifted out. and another set of maps slid into my hands. These weren't sketches. These were official. Stamped. Signed. Marked with federal seals older than half the houses in the HOA. And right there, across 3 pages, running in ink that had barely faded over 40 years, was the answer my gut already suspected. The shoreline, the dock, the boathouse, and the entire wedge of water were part of my parcel. Not the HOA, not the community. Mine. A rustle behind me made me turn. Marilyn had stepped back, her expression wobbling for the first time that afternoon. A hairline fracture in her perfect composure. What are those?" she asked. "The deed," I said, "and the original survey maps." "Impossible." I held one up. "This one's from 1978. "That land was reclassified," she snapped. "No," I said, unfolding the second map. "This one's from 1954. Her mouth twitched. "And this," I added, lifting the final sheet, "is from the 1940s. I let that hang for a moment. "Before your HOA even existed." Deputy Miller stepped in to look, the lake wind fluttering the corners of the aged documents. "These are legitimate federal survey stamps," he murmured. "You don't see these much anymore." The second deputy whistled under his breath. "These are older than my dad." I pulled the hand-drawn map from my pocket, the one the old neighbor had given me, and laid it beside the federal ones. The lines matched. The boundaries matched. Even the angle of the shoreline, the contour of the inlet, all of it mirrored the official records perfectly. The old man hadn't been warning me. He had been confirming what he already knew. "Where did you get that?" Marilyn hissed. "Who gave you that paper?" "A neighbor," I said. "Someone who remembers the truth." "That map is forged," she said, voice rising into panic. "Anyone can draw something like that." "Maybe," I said, "but it perfectly matches 3 federal surveys." Deputy Miller looked between us. "Ma'am, I need to ask you something. Did the HOA file a shoreline claim?" She stiffened. "We filed preservation documents." "That's not what I asked." She pressed her lips together. "The community has maintained that dock for years." "That still doesn't answer it," he said. "I don't have to explain myself to—" Her phone rang. She jolted like she'd been shocked. She stepped aside and answered it in a voice too hushed for us to hear. I shifted my attention to my own documents, spreading them across the hood of the truck. The federal map, the deed transfer, the parcel binder, and tucked between 2 folded sheets, something else caught my eye. A stamped sheet labeled Water Use Grant, Approved, followed by an unreadable signature and the year 1979. I blinked. Water use rights? Deputy Miller leaned in. "That's big. Riparian rights don't evaporate just because an HOA expands." I swallowed. Which means, he said slowly, if this checks out, you don't just own the dock. You own the water access, the boat channel, maybe even the marina easement. Marilyn ended her phone call abruptly, face pale beneath her makeup. "Officers," she said quickly, "none of that paperwork is admissible until we verify its authenticity." Deputy Miller raised an eyebrow. "That's what we're doing. You can't take his side." "I'm taking the side of the documents," he said. The faint echo of a radio crackled from his shoulder unit. "County dispatch to Unit 12, copy?" Miller pressed the mic. "Go ahead." "Be advised, a clerk from Mesa County Records is requesting immediate contact with the homeowner at 41 Shore Pine Road. Something about historical deeds." My stomach dropped. Mesa County Records was who issued the closing documents. The deputy turned to me. "Mr. Mercer, you want to call them?" I nodded, already dialing the number on the dispatch readout. It rang once before a clerk answered in a half-whisper. "Mr. Mercer, Where did you get the 1979 water use deed? I swallowed. Why? Because we've never seen it, and you need to come in now. The line went dead. A hush rolled over the lakeshore. Even the wind seemed to stop moving, as if the pine branches were leaning closer to listen. Deputy Miller lowered his hand from his radio. Sir, we're going to need to look deeper into this. Marilyn's voice cracked like glass. You can't possibly believe. She stopped mid-sentence, not because of anything we said, but because a neighbor across the road, a woman who'd been watching silently this whole time, had stepped forward and crossed her arms. Marilyn, the woman said coldly, maybe it's time you stopped lying. Marilyn recoiled like she'd been slapped, and in that moment, with the lake shimmering behind us and the truth finally pushing its way to the surface, I understood one thing clearly. This wasn't a simple dispute. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't even a power trip. It was a cover-up. And I had just cracked it open. The neighbors lingered at the property line like shadows glued to the fence posts, whispering among themselves as the early evening chilled. The lake, once bright and shimmering, had dipped into a deeper blue, quiet, waiting, the surface restless under a shifting wind. Pine needles swayed overhead, releasing that crisp resin smell that always came before a storm. The county clerk's urgent voice replayed in my mind on a loop. Where did you get that deed? You need to come in now. Deputy Miller gave Marilyn a final warning glance before turning to me. Mr. Mercer, if you want to straighten this out, the county would be the right place to start. I'm going, I said, gathering the documents from the hood of the truck. The sooner the better. Marilyn stepped forward, her heels sinking slightly into the softening gravel. Officers, you can't let him leave with those documents. They're evidence. They belong to him, Miller said sharply. Her nostrils flared. They belong to the HOA. No, ma'am, he replied. We'll let county records decide that now. She jabbed a trembling finger at me. If you drive off, you're obstructing an official HOA investigation. I paused. You're not law enforcement. I'm community law, she hissed. That's not a thing, Miller muttered. I got into my truck and turned the key. The engine rumbled awake, echoing low across the water. It felt like taking back a sliver of control, small but significant. As I backed out, Marilyn chased the vehicle a few feet, shouting something about bylaws and penalties. Her voice faded into the trees as I pulled onto the narrow lakeside road. The drive to the county office traced the water line. Shadows stretched long across the asphalt, flickering through the windshield like broken blinds. The tires hummed. The smell of cold lake water drifted through my cracked window. By the time I reached Mesa County Records, the sky had slipped into charcoal gray. The building, a low brick structure with a green tin roof, glowed from inside with fluorescent lights and the faint buzz of dying bulbs. Inside, the air smelled like dust, toner, and old legal paper. Familiar, almost comforting. A man in his early 40s with a neat beard and rolled-up sleeves stepped forward as soon as the door chimed behind me. You must be Mercer, he said. I'm Sam Ortega. He didn't offer a handshake, just motioned for me to follow him down a corridor lined with filing cabinets and maps of watershed zones. We stepped into a cramped back room with a metal table and stacks of thick binders. Sam closed the door behind us and let out a tight breath. I need to see that water use deed, he said. I handed it over. The old paper crackled under his fingertips as he unfolded it carefully. He studied the seals, the signatures, the parcel numbers. His expression turned from curiosity to shock, to something like dread. This isn't possible, he whispered. Why not? He grabbed another binder from a shelf, flipping through maps and photocopies. Because no one has seen this deed in decades. Hell, half the clerks don't even know water use deeds exist outside agricultural zones. I found it in the envelope from the previous owner. He glanced up sharply. Which envelope? I showed him the worn envelope with my uncle's name on the corner. Sam turned it over, reading the faded ink. Your uncle was Henry Mercer? Yes. Sam let out a slow, incredulous whistle. He was part of the old shoreline appeals back in the 80s. I read about it in archived minutes once. He argued the HOA had no right to redraw boundaries. And what happened? HOA won by default when he got sick. They quietly took control of the shoreline, started collecting fees. No one fought them after that. I felt something cold settle behind my ribs. My uncle tried to stop them? Sam nodded. Looks like it. And now, he tapped the papers, you're holding the evidence he never got to use. He spread all the documents across the metal table under the flickering light. The old federal maps, my deed, the 1979 water use rights, and the sketch given by the neighbor. Side by side, they formed a story the HOA never expected anyone to piece together. Here's the problem, Sam said, pointing to a faded red boundary line on a modern map. 3 years ago, the HOA submitted a shoreline reclassification. They redrew this entire section and claimed it as communal land. They can do that? No, he said firmly. Not legally, not without unanimous owner signatures, and certainly not without public notice. He turned the page. They filed it as emergency shoreline preservation, a loophole meant for dams and flood control. So they lied. They lied, he confirmed, and forged signatures. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. What happens now? I asked. Sam leaned back, rubbing his temples. If you pursue this, the HOA collapses. Their authority over the water evaporates. The fees they collected? Illegal. Every homeowner who paid them could file for restitution. A slow, stunned breath escaped me. That's a lot of money. Hundreds of thousands, Sam said. And that's just base fees. They added shore maintenance charges that weren't even tied to real work. I stared at the web of documents spread across the table. So the dock is mine? Yours, he said. The boathouse? Yours. The entire waterfront? He met my eyes with a solemn nod. Every inch the HOA pretended to own. Silence settled between us. Heavy, final. Then Sam stood and gathered everything into a neat stack. Mr. Mercer, you're holding a legal bomb. If you drop it in court, it blows the HOA wide open. I let the weight of that reality sink in. Do you want to drop it? He asked quietly. A long, drawn-out exhale left my lungs. Oh yes, I said. I really do. Sam slid a folder across the table. Then take this, he said. It's everything you'll need. As I stepped out into the darkening parking lot, papers tucked under my arm, the cold Montana air felt sharper, cleaner. The lake rustled somewhere beyond the pines like it knew the tide was turning. The HOA had spent years tightening their grip on the shoreline. But now I had the leverage to pry every finger loose. And I wasn't done yet. By the time I turned down the final curve toward the lake, dusk had settled like a heavy blanket over Clearwater Bluffs. The pines were silhouettes, long shadows stretching like black veins across the gravel. My headlights swept the shoreline, soft ripples shimmering with hints of moonlight, quiet and steady, the way water always is when it knows a storm is about to break. I eased my truck onto my driveway and instantly felt something was wrong. 2 HOA trucks sat parked across the gravel like barricades. Their hazard lights blinked in slow, deliberate flashes, orange pulses reflecting off the water like warning buoys. Between them stood Marilyn's silver Lexus, angled across my cabin walkway, as if she had staked an official claim. Wind rattled the chimes on a neighbor's porch. Somewhere across the lake, a lone loon called, its echo hollow and distant. As soon as I opened my truck door, I saw the papers. Sheets slapped against my cabin door in the breeze. Rows of bright laminated violation notices taped in a messy patchwork that looked more like a ransom collage than an official warning. Some clung stubbornly in the damp air. Others fluttered down onto the porch. 27. I counted as I approached. Improper siding installation. Unauthorized cabin occupancy. Unsafe dock. Non-compliant boat lift. Unapproved tree trimming. Unregistered access to body of water. And my personal favorite, failure to comply with community courtesy standards. I pulled one off the door. The adhesive snapped with a sound like tearing skin. Marilyn appeared from behind her Lexus, arms crossed, blazer buttoned high, the fading light catching on her earrings. She looked calmer than earlier, but it was that specific brand of calm certain people wear like armor, the kind that hides panic underneath. "Well," she said, "you've caused quite a disruption today." "Funny," I replied. "I was thinking the same thing about you." Deputy Miller's cruiser rolled up moments later, stopping behind my truck. He stepped out slowly, wariness in his posture. "Ms. Dorrance," he said with a sigh, "I told you not to escalate this situation." "I didn't," she said coolly. "These are standard violations." 27, I asked. "In 2 hours?" She didn't blink. "Your property is severely out of compliance." "My property," I repeated. "Glad we agree on that part." She lifted her chin. "Don't get clever, Mr. Mercer. You're living on borrowed time until we settle ownership of the shoreline. And until then, all HOA regulations apply." I held up the folder from the county office. "This says otherwise." "Oh, good," she said. "You found old papers. Do you know how many people bring in outdated documents and expect us to bend rules for them?" "These aren't outdated," I said. "They are irrelevant," she snapped. Deputy Miller rubbed the back of his neck. "Ma'am, county records may say otherwise." Marilyn turned on him sharply. "Deputy, with all due respect, unless you're a land surveyor or a property law expert, I suggest you remain neutral." "I'm trying," he said, "but you keep making it hard." She ignored him and shifted her full attention back to me. "Here's what's going to happen, Mr. Mercer. You're going to remove that vehicle from the driveway. Our bylaws prohibit overnight parking on unapproved surfaces. You're also going to refrain from touching the dock or boathouse until the HOA finishes reviewing your supposed deed." I smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the quiet kind. The kind men wear when they know something someone else doesn't. "You're in for a surprise," I said. She snorted. "I doubt that." I stepped away from her and dialed a number on my phone, the one Sam had given me when I left the county office. "Who are you calling?" she demanded. "You'll see," I said. The call was brief, only a few words. When I hung up, Marilyn's face tightened. "Who was that?" "Someone who's very good with boundary maps," she scoffed. "We have our own experts. We don't need yours." "Well," I said, "mine's coming anyway." The breeze shifted, rustling the cedar branches overhead. Moonlight stretched across the lake in a broken silver path. A few neighbors' porch lights flicked on, casting warm amber glows across their yards. People were watching again, peeking through blinds and screen doors. Waiting. Because they knew something was about to break. For a moment, silence hung heavy between us, all the weight of years of HOA intimidation pressing in from every direction. Marilyn's fingers tapped against her clipboard in an erratic rhythm. "You think you've won something," she said finally. "I don't think," I replied. "I know." "And what exactly do you think you're going to do with those papers? March into a meeting and humiliate us?" "No," I said. "Just tell the truth." "That's laughable." The gravel behind us crunched. A figure approached from the direction of the road, a tall man in a windbreaker, carrying a robust field bag and a metal survey tripod balanced over one shoulder. He moved with precise steps, like someone used to measuring land inch by inch. Marilyn's jaw dropped. "You called a land surveyor?" she sputtered. "No," I said. "I called the land surveyor, the one the county uses for disputes." She paled. "You wouldn't." I lifted the folder Sam gave me. "It's time." The surveyor nodded at me, unslinging his tripod. "Mr. Mercer, Deputy, evening." "Evening," Miller said. Marilyn took a step back. This is irregular." "No," the surveyor said. "This is process." He looked at me with a quiet confidence. "Let's see what the land really says." Marilyn's breath hitched. Because this wasn't just a challenge. It wasn't just a dispute. It was a line in the sand. And she knew mine was straighter than hers. Deputy Miller crossed his arms, watching the scene unfold with the same expression someone might wear before a controlled detonation. "All right," he said. "Let's get to work." The surveyor set the tripod, leveled it, adjusted his instrument. The moon slipped out from behind a cloud, silvering the shoreline, the cabin, the dock. The lake stretched quiet and vast and patient, like it had been waiting for this exact moment for decades. And as the first measurement was taken, Marilyn's confidence cracked like thin winter ice. Because the shoreline didn't lie. The land didn't lie. The maps didn't lie. And now? Neither could she. The surveyor's equipment clicked softly as he adjusted the leveling screws. The metal legs of the tripod sank into the gravel with small, deliberate bites, anchoring themselves like they were preparing for a long battle. The wind coming off the lake had a cooler bite now, whipping the tops of the pines into restless murmurs. Marilyn stood with rigid shoulders, arms cinched tight across her blazer, as if hugging herself against the inevitable. Deputy Miller stepped beside the surveyor. "All right, Owen, tell us where we stand." Owen, the county's top land surveyor, gave a calm nod. He looked like the kind of man who'd measured more forests, ranches, and lake shores than anyone alive in this valley. He opened his worn leather field book, the pages thick with hand-drawn maps and scribbled coordinates, then aimed the scope toward the first boundary marker. The small mirror inside the instrument glinted with reflected moonlight. "Marker 1, Owen said quietly. "Original boundary, 1946. Preserved on federal shoreline maps." He scribbled something in his field book, then looked up at me. "It's on your parcel." Marilyn exhaled sharply, but said nothing. Owen repositioned the instrument with steady hands. "Marker 2." The scope clicked. He frowned, just slightly. "Also your parcel." A ripple of murmurs drifted from the neighbors watching behind wooden fences. Someone drew in a breath. Someone else whispered, "I knew it." Marilyn shook her head, voice breaking. "This is ridiculous. Those markers don't mean anything anymore. The HOA redrew this shoreline in 2020. Owen didn't even look at her. The HOA doesn't have authority to redraw riparian boundaries without county oversight. "That's not true," she snapped. He gave her a look so dry it could have sanded the edge of a plank. "Ma'am, I'm the oversight." Even Deputy Miller fought a smile at that. Owen shifted the instrument again, aligning with the dock. The lake rippled gently, reflecting the tripod legs like a ghostly mirror image. My cabin behind us glowed soft amber from the porch light I'd forgotten to turn off. It cast long shadows across the gravel, stretching toward the water like evidence laid bare. Owen cleared his throat. "Now the interesting part. Your dock." "It's the HOA's dock," Marilyn said immediately. He ignored her and knelt to measure the distance from the tripod to the edge of the wooden planks. The old timber boards creaked beneath his boots. A soft mist was rising from the cooling water, drifting between us in pale ribbons. After a long moment, he stood. The dock, he said, is entirely within Mr. Mercer's original parcel boundaries. A wave of shock rolled through the spectators. Marilyn's face twitched. That cannot be right. Owen kept going, calm as a man describing the weather. The boathouse sits on the same line, and, give me a moment. He turned the instrument one final time, lining up with the deep water channel visible as a darker band beneath the surface. The wind carried the faint scent of lake mud and wet pine boards. Owen double-checked the reading. Then again. Then he closed his field book with a quiet thump. Mr. Mercer, he said, you own the entire waterfront. Dock, boathouse, shoreline, and water channel. All of it. The silence that followed felt like the whole valley paused to listen. Marilyn staggered back a step, her heels shifting in the gravel. The clipboard slipped from her fingers and landed flat at her feet. No, she whispered. No, no. You don't understand. This lake, this entire community, relies on that shoreline for access. Without it, the HOA can't. We can't. I stepped forward, holding the folder Sam had given me earlier. That's the problem, Marilyn. You relied on it. You never owned it. You're going to destroy everything, she screeched. No, I said evenly. You destroyed everything the moment you forged boundaries that didn't belong to you. Her face reddened. We did what we had to for the community. Owen raised a hand. Ma'am, forging county records isn't community service. Deputy Miller stepped between us before she could spit out another accusation. Ms. Dorrance, at this point, I strongly advise you to remain quiet until county legal reviews this. She ignored him, pointing at the neighbors like a preacher calling out sinners. He's lying to all of you. He wants to take your lake. He wants to shut down your boats, your access, everything. Enough, Owen said, louder than before. This isn't a debate. This is a land survey backed by federal records. Mr. Mercer's deed outranks anything the HOA has ever filed. The lake wind gusted suddenly, whipping Marilyn's hair across her face. She pushed it aside with a trembling hand. Then she pointed at me with fury burning in her eyes. You think this is over? She snarled. You don't know the half of what you've stepped into. Then enlighten us, I said. Her lips curled. You want the truth? Fine. The HOA already filed a claim with the state. You're too late. By morning, we'll have jurisdiction over the marina, the entire marina. My stomach tightened, but before I could reply, a calm voice spoke from behind me. I doubt that, Attorney Leah Conway said, stepping into the circle of porch light. The crowd parted instinctively. Leah, in her dark jacket and boots, looked like she belonged in every courtroom from here to Helena. She held her own folder, thicker than mine, and tapped it once against her side. Ms. Dorrance, she said, you didn't file anything with the state. You submitted a draft, one that was rejected because your boundary claims were already under review for irregularities. Marilyn froze. Leah continued, her voice like steel cutting clean wood. Also, as of 15 minutes ago, the county has officially opened a fraud inquiry into your shoreline redraw, which means... She stepped aside so I could move forward. I took a breath. And that's not the worst news. The lake went utterly still, as if waiting. The worst news, I said, lifting the folder, is that your HOA has zero authority over docks, ramps, or shoreline structures. Not now, not ever. The entire waterfront belongs to me, legally, permanently. A hush rippled through the crowd. Someone gasped. Someone whispered a curse under their breath. Marilyn's clipboard clattered as she stumbled backward onto the hood of her Lexus, clinging to it like the world was tilting. You can't do this, she whispered. I didn't do anything, I said. The truth did. She looked at the water then. The lake she had treated as her kingdom, now slipping out of her grasp like sand through fingers. And for the first time since I'd arrived, she looked afraid. The lake air shifted, colder now, rolling in low and heavy across the water like a warning carried on the surface. Neighbors stood frozen along the fences, some clutching their jackets, others gripping porch railings. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The only sounds were the restless ripple of lake water against the pilings and the soft clink of Owen's survey tripod settling deeper into the gravel. Marilyn's chest rose and fell in tight, shallow breaths. Her perfectly pressed blazer no longer looked crisp. It looked constricting, like it was squeezing the truth out of her whether she liked it or not. Attorney Leah Conway stepped closer, her boots crunching through loose gravel. She spoke with the calm, measured tone of someone used to standing in front of judges. "Ms. Dorrance," she said, "you've been operating under the assumption that no one would ever look at the old shoreline records again. You forged a redraw. You collected fees for land you never owned. And you intimidated homeowners into believing they had no rights." "That's not true," Marilyn barked. But the tremble in her voice betrayed her. "It is true," Leah continued. "And now that Mr. Mercer has produced historic maps, county deeds, and federal water rights, the entire scheme collapses." Leah opened her folder, thicker and heavier than any HOA binder I'd seen. Inside were spreadsheets, invoices, ledgers, and highlighted entries. "Let's talk numbers." A nervous whisper rippled through the onlookers. People leaned forward instinctively. "For 10 years, Leah said, the HOA charged residents shore maintenance fees totaling," she paused, flipping through pages, $620,000. Someone gasped. Someone else muttered a curse. Marilyn's face drained to a chalky white. Leah continued, unwavering. "Dock rentals, boat slip charges, and annual water access fees were collected from every homeowner. Yet the HOA never filed receipts for repairs, never reported labor hours, and never hired contractors for shoreline work." A man on the far porch yelled, "So where did the money go?" Leah met Marilyn's eyes. "Straight into the HOA discretionary account." Marilyn's knees buckled, and she steadied herself on the hood of her Lexus. "That account was used," Leah said, "for so-called community improvements, including your new garden terrace, the clubhouse remodel, and several consulting fees paid to your brother's construction company." The crowd erupted. People shouted. A couple stormed off their porches, demanding answers. Even the lake seemed to stir more violently, waves slapping the dock, as if echoing the outrage. Deputy Miller raised both hands. "Everyone calm down!" But calm was no longer an option. A floodgate had opened, and the truth came pouring out. One homeowner, an older man with a navy ball cap, stepped forward. "My wife and I paid those access fees for years," he said. "We were told the dock needed constant repair. But it never changed. Not once." Another homeowner chimed in. "We asked for a cost breakdown. Marilyn threatened to fine us for questioning her authority." Heads turned toward her, eyes blazing with betrayal. Marilyn's lips trembled. "It wasn't like that. You don't understand the financial needs of an HOA. We had to—" "You had to steal?" a woman yelled. "No," Marilyn cried. "We had to maintain the standard." "There is no standard," I cut in, my voice steady. "There's only the truth. And the truth is, you built a scam on land. Never belonged to you." Marilyn's gaze snapped toward me. "You think you're some kind of hero? All you've done is destroy the community's access to the water." "No," I said, stepping forward. "You did that when you claimed ownership illegally." A low rumble filled the night as a neighbor's old diesel pickup pulled up to the property line. The driver leaned out. "Mercer," he called. "You're not the only one who got something in your mailbox this week." He held up an envelope, county issued, just like the one Sam had given me. Leah motioned him forward. Several neighbors followed, each carrying various documents: tax records, HOA notices, unexplained surcharges. Owen watched with a grim expression. "Looks like people have been wondering about this for a while." Then something unexpected happened. The HOA treasurer, Walter Kilby, a short, balding man who always hovered a few steps behind Marilyn, stepped forward with shaking hands. He didn't look at me, or at the neighbors. He looked at the ground. "I can't do this anymore," he murmured. Marilyn jerked her head toward him. "Walter, don't you dare." He swallowed hard, eyes glistening. "I can't. I'm sorry, Marilyn. I'm done covering for this." A collective breath sucked in across the crowd. "What does that mean?" someone asked. Walter wiped his forehead, trembling. "The boundary redraw. Marilyn ordered it. She said the dock would bring in revenue if we controlled it. She forged the signatures. She instructed me to file the paperwork." Marilyn's voice cracked. "Walter." He kept going. "She said if anyone asked, we'd say it was preservation. But she knew. She knew the shoreline belonged to this parcel. She told us to hide the old maps." I stepped closer. "Where?" "In the HOA office." His voice dropped. "Bottom drawer of the file cabinet. Locked. Under the summer program binders." Neighbors shouted. A couple cried. Someone kicked the gravel so hard it scattered like hail. Deputy Miller exhaled heavily. "All right, this is officially a fraud investigation." But before anyone could add to the chaos, headlights appeared at the far end of the road. A white SUV rolled toward us with a government seal stamped on the side. Not local, not sheriff, federal. The crowd went silent. Leah's eyes narrowed. "What is this?" The SUV stopped in front of my cabin. A man stepped out. Tall, calm, wearing a jacket marked with the crest of the Water Management Department. He held a thick envelope sealed with blue tape. "Mr. Mercer?" he asked. "Yes?" He handed me the envelope. "This was expedited from the state. It concerns your property." Marilyn lunged forward. "Let me see that." But Deputy Miller blocked her. "Not a chance." I broke the seal. Inside was a document stamped with federal ink. My breath caught. Leah leaned close, reading over my shoulder. "Oh my God," she whispered. I closed the folder slowly. The lake behind us went quiet again. Eerily. Perfectly still. Because the document didn't just confirm ownership. It changed everything. And Marilyn knew it the moment my eyes met hers. This wasn't just a shoreline dispute. It was a legal earthquake. And the shaking had only begun. The federal envelope felt heavier than paper should. Thick parchment, stamped with blue ink, wrapped with a seal I'd only seen on government buildings and water treatment plants across the state. As I held it, the lake breeze shifted, brushing against my back like a cold hand urging me to open it. Neighbors leaned closer. Marilyn backed away. Even the surveyor stopped adjusting his tripod. I unfolded the document. The heading hit me like a wave crashing into dock pilings. Riparian Rights Protection Act, Federal Confirmation of Ownership. Under it, in bold type, property owner, Daniel Mercer. Authorized control, full shoreline, dock system, water access channel, and marina easements. A breath left my chest. The lake itself seemed to hush. Attorney Leah leaned in. "Daniel, this is permanent. Irrevocable. Your ownership is federally recognized. Not just county level. Federal." Owen nodded. "This trumps every HOA claim, every local redraw, every forged boundary they filed." A murmur rippled through the neighbors. Relief, vindication, anger, disbelief all woven together like a raw cord. Someone whispered, "He owns everything, the whole water line." Marilyn went pale. "No," she mouthed. "No, that's impossible." Deputy Miller took the paper gently from my hand and read it for himself. The porch light reflected off the official embossing. "This is legitimate," he said. 100%. His voice carried across the lakeshore with the weight of an iron gate slamming shut. Marilyn staggered backward until her back hit the side of her Lexus. The metal groaned under her weight. "This can't be happening," she whispered. "We filed everything correctly." You filed nothing correctly," Leah interrupted. "You filed lies." Walter, the HOA treasurer, wrung his hands, guilt written in every line on his face. "Marilyn, we knew that shoreline was disputed. You said it wouldn't matter. You said nobody would check. And they wouldn't have," she snapped, turning on him. "If he hadn't shown up with the deed?" I asked. "With the truth," Leah corrected sharply. The federal agent who brought the envelope stepped forward, hands clasped behind his back. "Ms. Dorrance, the State Water Management Department has issued an immediate investigative order. As of now, all HOA operations involving the shoreline are suspended." She blinked. "Suspended?" "Pending audit," he clarified. "Our team will seize all relevant financial records, boundary filings, and shoreline access documents." "And," Deputy Miller added, "the county sheriff's office is opening a fraud investigation into your forged signatures and falsified redraw claims." Shouts of anger erupted from the neighbors. "You lied to us! You took our money! You bullied everyone!" Marilyn's face hardened into something sharp and twisted. "I did what I had to do for Clearwater Bluffs. For all of you." "For yourself," a homeowner snapped. "You did it for yourself." The federal agent motioned to two other state officers waiting near the SUV. "Retrieve the HOA administrative records." They approached Marilyn's Lexus, where multiple HOA binders lay tossed in the passenger seat. Papers were sticking out from under visors and floor mats like she had tried to hide them in a panic. "No!" she cried, stepping in front of the door. "Those are private HOA documents." "They're evidence," the agent said. She clenched her fists so tight her knuckles turned bone white. "This is harassment. You have no idea what this lake would be without—" "Without?" I asked softly. "Without the HOA pretending to own it? Without you charging people to use something you never had a right to?" She whirled toward me, eyes blazing. "Do you think you're better than us? You think waltzing in here with your fancy papers gives you the right to ruin everything?" I stepped forward, voice low but steady. "You ruined everything the day you stole from every single person on this lake." The air hung thick. The lake water rolled softly against the dock, a gentle hush that somehow made Marilyn's heavy breathing seem louder. Then the radio clipped to Deputy Miller's uniform, crackled. "Unit 12, be advised. FBI liaisons en route per fraud coordination request. ETA 10 minutes. The crowd erupted again. Not in chaos, this time in raw, stunned catharsis. The federal agent nodded to Miller. "We'll coordinate with them on arrival." Miller turned to Marilyn. "Ms. Dorrance, please step aside." "No," she whispered. "Ma'am," he repeated, firmer. "Step aside." She didn't move. Leah crossed her arms. "Marilyn, don't make this worse." The agent tapped his badge. "Interference with a federal seizure is a crime." Slowly, painfully slowly, Marilyn stepped away from her Lexus. She looked smaller now, like her power had been stripped from her shoulder pads and blazer in one swift motion. State officers opened the car door and began pulling binders out one by one, labeled ledgers, meeting minutes, water access fund allocations, renovation spreadsheets. Every page was a nail in the coffin of the HOA's fabricated empire. Walter sank onto a driftwood stump, head in his hands. "I should have spoken up years ago." "You should have," I said gently. "But you're speaking now." As the officers carried the boxes of seized documents toward their SUV, Marilyn suddenly jolted forward. "This isn't over. Do you hear me? This lake cannot function without the HOA. You can't do this to us. You can't—" The federal agent cut her off. "Ma'am, you will address your concerns to the investigators." She stared at him, breathing hard, chest rising in sharp bursts. Then she turned her gaze on me. "You won't last here," she spat. No one has ever defeated the HOA, and no one ever will. I met her glare evenly. You're wrong. The headlights of 2 more SUVs swept across the trees, lighting up the lakeshore like a stage. Their doors opened. Agents stepped out. The federal hammer had arrived. One agent motioned to me. Mr. Mercer, we'll need a statement in the morning, but for now, congratulations. You are the rightful, federally recognized owner of Clearwater Bluff's entire waterfront. A quiet murmur rippled through the crowd. Marilyn's voice came out as a whisper. What happens now? I looked at her, then at the lake behind us, dark, steady, unbroken. Now, I said, now we rebuild the truth. The wind shifted, stirring the dock ropes gently, as if the lake itself approved, and as the FBI agents approached the HOA president, placing a gentle but firm hand on her shoulder for questioning, I understood. The shoreline was mine. But justice belonged to everyone who had been afraid to speak. And tonight, their silence finally broke. The chaos of flashing lights faded one vehicle at a time, leaving the lakeshore quieter than it had been all day. The FBI SUVs rolled down the dirt road, tires crunching softly. Deputies followed behind them, their radios murmuring low. Neighbors drifted back toward their porches in slow, thoughtful steps, voices hushed like a congregation leaving a long-awaited sermon. Only the lake stayed loud, slapping gently at the pilings, pushing cool night air up toward the cabins. The water seemed to breathe with a kind of tired relief. I stood at the end of my dock, the old timber groaning beneath my boots, as if recognizing the weight of a rightful owner. The moon hung low, painting a shimmering silver path across the surface straight toward me. Behind me, the last porch lights flickered off one by one. Daniel, Leah said quietly, stepping beside me. You did it. I exhaled, long and slow. I didn't plan any of this. You didn't have to. She folded her arms, gaze locked on the dark stretch of lake. You just told the truth. And the truth did the rest. The wind rolled across the water, carrying the faint scent of pine sap, wet cedar, and distant campfire smoke. Somewhere down the shoreline, an owl hooted a slow, steady rhythm. The whole valley felt different now, lighter, open, restored. Federal recognition, Leah said. Not many lake owners in Montana get that kind of authority. Feels strange, I admitted. Like I inherited something much bigger than a dock. You did. She paused. You inherited responsibility. I thought about that as she walked back toward the cabin, giving me space to breathe. The rippling water below reflected my face in broken fragments, each small wave reshaping it, settling it, smoothing it. Responsibility, legacy, justice. 3 words I hadn't expected to collide when I drove onto this property earlier that day. Then footsteps crunched softly behind me. It was Walter, the HOA treasurer, hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets, shoulders slumped with a weight he'd carried too long. I wanted to apologize, he said simply, for everything. I turned to face him. He looked older than even an hour ago. You weren't the only one scared of her, he said. But I should have spoken up. Years ago. It's never too late to do the right thing, I said. He lifted his eyes to mine, tears catching in the moonlight. The residents, they're grateful. They feel like someone finally stood up for them. I didn't do it for them, I said honestly. I did it because it was right. That's why it mattered, he whispered. Then he walked away. I stayed on the dock a few minutes longer until the night fully settled. The lake glistened with scattered stars, each reflection dancing quietly on the surface. In the stillness, the responsibility Leah mentioned finally settled in my chest, not as a burden, but as something honest and grounding. By morning, the federal teams would be back. Investigations would begin. Marilyn would face the consequences of her choices. The HOA was effectively suspended pending hearings, its power gone, its authority dissolved like paper sinking in water. But the community? They weren't losing anything. They were gaining something. A shoreline, a voice, a future without fear. The next day arrived wrapped in soft gold sunlight. Mist curled above the lake like drifting silk. I brewed coffee on the cabin stove, its hiss and warmth grounding me as the scent filled the kitchen. By mid-morning, people started gathering. They came in twos, in small family clusters, hands stuffed in jacket pockets, faces uncertain but hopeful. A few carried handmade signs that read things like, "Thank you, Daniel," and "Our shoreline belongs to all of us." I walked out onto the porch, mug in hand. An older woman with bright eyes and braided gray hair stepped forward. "Mr. Mercer, would you ever consider opening the dock to the community? Not under the HOA, but under something fairer?" Around her, heads nodded. Faint murmurs of agreement rose. I looked out across the lake, sun glittering on the water, the boathouse creaking gently with life. "Not just open," I said. "Shared, transparent, no fees, no threats, no lies." Someone cheered. Others joined. A wave of relief washed through the group like warm daylight breaking through clouds. Later that afternoon, I filed paperwork to create the Clearwater Community Marina, free public access, maintained jointly by residents, governed by an open committee, and independent from any HOA structure. A real community asset, honest, visible, uncorrupted, all facilitated by the federal rights I now held, but controlled collectively by the people who lived here. When the sun dipped low and golden light swept across the water, kids were already fishing from the end of my dock. A couple launched kayaks. A retired veteran sat in a lawn chair, saying it felt like the lake he remembered from decades ago. Marilyn's Lexus was gone from the lakeshore by nightfall. Deputy Miller said she'd been taken in for questioning. The charges would be handled by county and federal investigators. No one celebrated her downfall, but no one mourned it either. After the last kayak returned to shore and neighbors drifted home, I walked down to the dock one final time. The boards under my feet were steady, worn, and honest, just like the lake itself. I whispered into the night. They called 911 on me for moving into my own home, but in the end? The moon shimmered across the ripples like a knowing smile. I owned everything they tried to steal. Wind rustled the pine needles in agreement, whispering through the branches like an echo of long-awaited justice. And for the first time since arriving at Clearwater Bluffs, I felt at home, truly home. If you've ever stood your ground for what's right, drop a yes in the comments so I know I'm not alone out here. And if stories about justice, dignity, and protecting what's yours mean something to you, go on and subscribe. I've got plenty more real American fights to share with you.